Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, there's times in our lives when the questions are just as important as the answers, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do because you're listening right now. You can subscribe. Please subscribe to the podcast. Hit that button. Give us the old 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. We're at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. We're pretty much everywhere. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd really appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram at, well, you guessed it, we're at In the Seats, for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large, because if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. The coming-of-age drama is a well-worn formula in cinema history, but it tends to get some good results. Speaking of which, it's one of those results that we're actually talking about today. The film's called Girl Picture. It's a Finnish coming-of-age drama, and it opened this past Friday here in Toronto, but it's not only getting hauled over, but it's expanding to Vancouver and Ottawa, and then Calgary and Edmonton in the coming weeks. It's a fantastic piece of cinema. It's the story of Mimmi, Emma, and Rönkkö, who are three young girls who are at the cusp of womanhood, trying to figure out life in their own way. And during 3 consecutive Fridays, 2 of them experience the earth-moving effects of what it means to fall in love, while the other one goes on a quest to find something she's never quite experienced or even understood before, which would be pleasure. It's a very honest, it's a very real coming-of-age story. It feels genuine. It's incredibly well done. It's still pretty cinematic as well at the same time. And it is from director Alli Haapasalo. I apologize if I butchered that pronunciation. But we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with Alli to talk about the origins of the story, her process making film, and the whole 9 yards. I mean, it's one of those movies that really deserves an audience because it's worth seeing. It translates through gender lines, through, preference lines, through orientation lines of stuff. It's really a fantastic piece of cinema that I cannot recommend highly enough. But check it, like I said, check out Girl Picture at a theater near you, either here in Toronto or expanding out to Ottawa, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary in the coming week or weeks. But first, enjoy our talk with Alli, because between you and me, it's a pretty good one.
Here we go.
Now, obviously, to kick it off, just congratulations on the film. I really enjoyed it. It felt to me frank feels like the wrong word, but very honest sort of exploration of sort of burgeoning sexuality. Walk me through the origin of it all on your end.
Well, I'm very glad, first of all, that you are saying that it's frank and has authenticity or realism, because that really was my main goal. This story is beautiful in the sense that it allows room for character exploration, emotional truth, and sort of more space for just sort of like going around the theme that we're dealing with, rather than being very constructed or plotty. And that was something I had been looking for. My previous film, I had my first feature, Love and Fury, I struggled with the size of the story, and I was frustrated. I felt like, film as a medium is too simple. I can't put all these themes and characters and statements and everything in it. And so I realized that I really needed to simplify. And so that became like a really, really big goal for me, to find in this story what is specifically the emotional truth of these girls and their growing pains, and how can we talk about that in small enough and simple enough and clear enough form that allows it to have frankness and reality and authenticity. I really did not want a film that wouldn't feel relevant for young women. The whole point was that it would feel relevant for young women because Ilona, Daniela, and I, the two writers and I, felt like as young women growing up, we didn't have a lot of characters to identify with. So we certainly did not want to repeat that. We wanted to instead really create characters that young women could identify with.
No, I mean, I think you've done that because, I mean, these characters are going through these experiences with such subtlety, I mean, with such nuance. I mean, talk to me a little bit about the casting process because, I mean, obviously you've got to find the right people for the right parts who can sort of convey that because, I mean, there's nothing about this story that sort of hits the audience over the head with a hammer. It's all very subtle and it's all very nuanced and it's all very real.
Thank you. Yeah, I knew for specifically the reasons that I mentioned about the story. I knew that this film would, in fact, live or die with the cast, right? You know, like if you didn't have authenticity there, and if it wasn't sort of watertight in terms of performance, it would easily fall flat because the plot wouldn't come in and fix it. You know, it's not full of action; it's full of emotion that has to really ring true. So I took casting really slowly, really slowly. I took 3 months to find just the 3 leads. And that was to allow myself time to think, not because it was difficult to find good actors. There were so many very talented and very charismatic young women that were applying for the roles, but because really, first of all, you're always casting people together, not as individuals only. But with this trio, it became clear quite quickly that if you changed one, everything changed. You know, it was like casting a perfect band that would play seamlessly together.
Right.
And so I went to several different rounds, and in the end, all actors who came to the callbacks also read the script, because it was really important for me to know what they felt about the story, what their ability to analyze dramaturgy was, and how interested were they in dedicating themselves to the roles and taking ownership for the characters. You know, I didn't just want cast members who come in and do the scenes the way I asked them to and then go home. I wanted them to like question me and debate the story and really like develop the characters and do a big collaboration, and also be ready for extensive rehearsal period, which we did.
I got to imagine that was pivotal just to sort of get the right, I mean, I guess cadence is the right word, because I mean, it felt very much like secondhand, you know, like it felt very, again, there was a real flow to it all.
Thank you. Yeah. It's really great how much the girls brought to the plate. I'm not saying that they changed the dialogue or anything. That's the beautiful writing of Ilona and Daniela. But they always brought their truth to the scenes. Like many people have, for example, commented on how Mimmi and Rönkkö's characters seem like really true best friends. And even when they fight, in the end, they run to each other and hug each other really tightly. And that hug is not scripted at all. That scene really ended in you know, very conflicted way, but the actors just felt really strongly that the characters would in fact go and immediately find consolation in each other, which they did, and that moment rings very true. So that's just a small example of how much real life they brought onto the big screen.
Well, I mean, and that's fantastic, because I mean, obviously there have been other films along this line that have explored similar themes, but in many ways, some of those films have always felt like they've been trying to put forth a message or trying to say something or trying to make a statement, where this was very much more character driven and much more about sort of the individuals. And I mean, for you as a storyteller, how important is it to sort of not just focus on character, but sort of focus on the right characters? Because I mean, like you said before, like if these 3 had been any different, it wouldn't have worked the same.
Yeah. It's everything, really. It's like hard for me to even imagine this film with different leads, really. And I think, you know, the whole rehearsal process We rehearsed for 3 months, not of course every day, but over the course of 3 months, we met a lot. We talked a ton. We shared so much. We became, I would say, friends. And we certainly built a trust between us that allowed really sort of like a free working flow and environment. And so that, of course, affects the content too, like nobody just shows up and does the work and goes home. Everybody's sort of creating together. And so therefore, if you change the people, you change the work, you change the piece of work. I believe very strongly in collaboration with my artistic team and with my lead actors. And if you change one part, the animal that the film is changes somewhat. It's never the same.
Do you find that applies sort of across the board with all your work? Because, I mean, obviously, it feels like your films, they're more than jobs. They're artistic explorations. They're not people going in and coming home. It feels like people are very invested to sort of the stories that you want to tell.
I think so. I think I'm always looking for people who have that investment. I'm always looking for storytellers in every part. And I don't mean just parts in front of the camera, but the artistic crew. And everybody tells the story from, of course, the point of view of their department. A makeup designer is not there to just put on makeup. The makeup designer is there to create the character, the first things we see about a character, the habitus of the character. So I'm first and foremost looking for a storyteller in that role. And I think I'm always looking for people who are very willing to jump in. I have actually really long prep processes also, because I just really enjoy that artistic exploration myself. Maybe it's very self-indulgent. I just love having meetings with people and sort of trying to dissect all aspects of humanity with all these intelligent storytellers.
Well, I mean, a lot of that came through in just sort of the visual fabric of the film, because, I mean, I loved the use of color and just sort of, I mean, it was almost kaleidoscopic in a way, just very subtle and very soft. I mean, there wasn't a lot of hard edges to it, but it felt very alive. Like, how important was it for you to not just have this very sort of character-driven story, but give us something that was visually very engaging as well?
Well, that's a big, how should I say, dear beloved thing. Of course, I guess for every filmmaker, but yeah, I just love the process of figuring out the aesthetics of a specific story, of a specific film. I'm pretty methodological, so it means that DP Jarmo Kiuru and I, this was our third collaboration, we love to sort of create a specific method for each film that we are working on. And we love the process of discovery and arriving there. And with this one, for example, if you did like a film school study of the different Fridays, you would notice how meticulously and beautifully Jarmo is lighting it from muted Finnish, winter colors, grays, different hues of magentas and blues, and then going into a deep velvety night with more club lighting, neon lighting, laser tag lighting, and repeating this beautifully throughout the film in a very consistent way, which doesn't feel boring, but gives it shape and spine. So that all of this, that long process that we do in the prep for months is by far my favorite part of the film production.
Wow, fantastic. Now, I mean, this is a bit of a silly question, but it's one I always like to ask. Like, can you think back to the earlier days, like the young you? Like, was there a movie or a moment in your life that had the light bulb go off and made you want to go, you know what, I want to get into this business. I want to tell stories this way?
I've thought that I should decide on a fictional story about that, because it would be so much easier to answer you and tell, yeah, my dad took me to see City Lights by Chaplin, and like when I saw that, I never wanted to do anything else except movies, because that would be like a simple thing. But unfortunately, my story is a little bit more boring, I guess. I just grew up with film. I watched everything on Finnish TV as a kid, from like Finnish 40s melodramas to Westerns. I loved Westerns, musicals, American Hollywood classics, European art house, anything. And then spent my youth in the video store and the movies. So I I just loved films. And of course, there were many, many significant films that have most likely very largely affected the way that I've wanted to make films, like films like Cry Freedom, I watched over and over again
Oh,
and
wow.
felt very strongly about how, that was kind of like a life-changing film. I thought
Sure, yeah.
I would, yeah. And so many others. But yeah, maybe I should start to tell a story that it was Cry Freedom specifically.
But you know what, though? I mean, that's not boring, though, because, I mean, we live in such a day and age where, I mean, there is such a, there is so much content out there, but at the same time, people coming up and people who, I want to make films, I want to do that, they don't seem to understand the importance of watching and viewing and knowing what came before you. And I mean, for you, I mean, how do you think the importance of being a movie watcher and a movie fan informs you as a filmmaker? Because I mean, it's one of those things where I've even talked to some filmmakers who, when they were young, weren't necessarily watching a lot of films, or it was one specific film.
Yeah, I actually always felt that I watched too little. Like ever since starting in film school at the age of 20, I always felt like I hadn't seen enough. Because I guess also when you start in film school, you realize like, whoa, in addition to all the films that you thought that you thought that you've seen a lot of film, but then in addition to all that, there is this like enormous wealth of gorgeous work. And then, even later, you discover like, oh yeah, and then there's a lot of female filmmakers, for example, completely forgotten about by film history that I've never even heard about. And so it feels like the world is just completely saturated with film. So I've seen a fraction of it, even if I feel like I've seen a lot. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. It does seem like, now that I'm not 20 anymore, now that I'm 44, I realized, actually, I have seen a decent amount of film, and I would hate to be a film student today and try to see all of the stuff now from, this point in life. Like, at least I got a 20-year head start compared to the people today, because it is true that I was trying to reference many films during this production, and they definitely were not familiar films to people who are 20.
Hell, I mean, I'm a film journalist and I'm 44 too. And I mean, I still feel like I haven't watched enough. It's one of those things, like if you're really invested in the art and you're really invested in the experience, you'll never feel like you've watched enough.
Yeah, true.
But I mean, you know what? Thank you for giving us a film that, I mean, I know it's female driven, but I mean, even as a man, it felt relatable and understandable. And I mean, it was a beautiful piece of work, and just, I can't wait for more people to see it. And thank you so much for the time today. And again, congratulations on the work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You
all
too.
Right.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.